We are now going beyond Inlang in 81 seconds, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to integrate into a regular web app. In case you have missed Inlang in 81 seconds, click here for the video. Otherwise, let's get started. I'm going to use React, but we have tutorials for React, of course, Vue.js, Svelte, Next.js, Svelte Kit, you name it, everything that works with JavaScript. For now, if you want to get informed when we launch Inlang for other languages or frameworks, consider subscribing. A little disclaimer though, Inlang is an early alpha. That means by the time you watch this video, the getting started is likely outdated. I advise you to check out our GitHub repository for the latest getting started. And a small favor that I'm going to ask you, since we're in early alpha, we appreciate every feedback we can get. Doesn't matter where it is, here on YouTube, on Reddit, in our GitHub repository, wherever. Alright, let's get to it. I'm creating a basic React app with create React app, the only difference being I'm explicitly saying I want TypeScript in this project. Next, I'm just opening the folder where I created that React app with Visual Studio Code. So far so good. In order to get everything out of Inlang, I'm installing the Inlang Visual Studio Code extension, which right now fulfills the purpose of creating keys directly in the IDE, but we hope to extend it with other features. If you have an idea what feature we could add to the VS Code extension, then let us know in the comments. Next, I'm installing the SDK, which is TypeSafe E18N. And don't get confused, we're installing 3 individual packages here. That has to do with the architecture of Inlang. Both the importer and SDK need to run simultaneously to your dev script. The importer's job is to constantly watch for changes in the dashboard and export those changes to the SDK. The SDK will then generate the types and we get type safety. Which leads us to the next step. We have to configure both the SDK and importer. I'm creating the TypeSafe E18N config here, that's for the SDK, and I'm specifying here that I want the types for React. The next step is to configure the importer. We do that with an inlang config.json file, and we're specifying in there the project ID and the wrapping pattern. The wrapping pattern determines how the text you're highlighting when you create a key in the IDE will be replaced. And that's a good example because it's using Svelte instead of React. And on Svelte, you have to prefix the LL object, which contains your translations, with a $sign. In React, you don't, and you can specify that in the wrapping pattern. In order to get the project ID, you have to create a project over at app.inlang.dev. I'm creating a project here. I'm going to name it React Example. And I'm specifying that the app is in English right now. And I want to translate it into German, French, Spanish, and Dutch. Now we have to open the project, go to settings, and copy the project ID into our inlang.config.json file. Next up, I'm going to adjust the start script to run the importer, SDK, and React app itself in parallel. We are using concurrently for that. Remember, we installed it 1.5 minutes ago, and we're going to use it right away. So run npm run start in your terminal. You're going to see that you suddenly have an i18n folder in the root directory of your app. That contains all the translations and types. When you start the script for the first time, sometimes there are hiccups, so just restart the script and you will see that the React app, et voila, appears. We now have to wrap the root of our app with the TypeSafe E18N component so that our translations are available throughout our whole app. And keep in mind that the app is not always your root component. In this case, for example, it's the index that wraps the app component. There's one last thing. We need to import the LL object from the context that we get from the E18N context. Sorry, a lot of contexts, I know. But that line of code, you can just copy it and it will work. You just have to make sure that you import, of course, use context from React and E18N context from the E18N folder that we created for you. Now let's get going. We're gonna start with learn React, and you're gonna learn how to create a key with Inlang. I'm gonna name the key learn, and you'll actually see that the wrapping pattern is not correct because if we interpolate variables in templates, of course we have to wrap it with curly braces. So I'm going to edit that real quick, and if we go back to our React app and refresh it, we'll see that, well, nothing really changed because the site is still in English. But if we go to the dashboard now, we see the key that we just created and all the translations for the languages that we've chosen when we created the project. I'm going to approve all the translations. That's really a peace of mind because you can never be sure that the machine translations are good enough. And it's just assurance for you that you read over the translations and think they're good enough. We can start to do cool things now. The website on the left is in English. We can change the English translation, so to say, and let's say we're learning Vue.js instead of React. Before showing translations, a little demonstration on type safety already. We only have one key, namely learn. I'm going to make a small typo and you will see that we immediately get an error in the IDE. All right, that was type safety. Now I'm going to translate the second sentence in here. I'm going to remove the code tags for it though. Reason being, React, you need to install an external dependency to parse HTML as a string. For now, it's simpler if we just remove it. Same thing again, we create the key, it will create all the auto translations, but since we changed the wrapping pattern, the key will be inserted correctly in our markup. The last thing we need to do is have some sort of language detection. I'm going to make a very quick and dirty solution, which is 3 times the same button with a different language. And et voila, your app is now translated into 5 different languages, of which only 3 are clickable, but it's up to you to make a sophisticated language picker. And all of that in under 5 minutes without actually writing any translations. I think that's pretty cool. If you disagree, please let us know in the comments. Again, we are in early alpha. We appreciate every feedback. If you want to stay up to date, consider subscribing and star our repository on GitHub.